Hello everyone, this is PatNet coming to you with a new video. December has rolled around, which means Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi is almost upon us. This is why I thought it would be a great time to discuss Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens. More specifically, the aspects of the movie that I think could have been improved or taken out completely. Please keep in mind that this video isn't a review, so its purpose is to not prove whether the movie is good or bad. Its purpose is to shed some light on some of the more underlooked portions of the film. But regardless of my problems with the film, it's important to note that I still enjoyed the movie and I would rank it in the better half of the Star Wars movies. Typically, if there's a movie or series that I'm really passionate about, I like to dissect it and figure out what I like and don't like, not because I want to defame the movie itself or anything like that. I just like to get a clear understanding as to why I like certain parts of the film and why I dislike others. By no means am I trying to force these thoughts on you and make you appreciate the movie less, and I trust that you can come to any conclusions about the film yourself. Let it be known that as of the time of recording this, I have not seen Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi, and it's possible that it'll answer some of the questions that I have. However, I'm trying to analyze this movie as a standalone film, and I don't want the promise of a sequel to excuse some of the problems of Episode 7. Also, this video contains major spoilers for Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens, and all the episodes below. Probably I spoiled something at one point. I didn't keep a tally mark for every time I spoiled something, but hopefully you've seen Star Wars at least. Hopefully. Since that's out of the way, I'm going to distribute my problems into segments, and the first segment I'm going to be talking about is called The Renewed Hope. My first and probably biggest problem with Episode 7 is how much it resembles Episode 4. This isn't a groundbreaking observation, and I believe most casual viewers pick up on the returning themes and plot points. But just to give some examples, Rey and Luke both come from desert-covered islands, both desire to figure out who their parents are, both have a father-like figure who dies, both join a rebellion/resistance, both seek training of an old Jedi who has an emotional connection with the main antagonist, and you know what? That's a good segue into the villains. The obvious appeal of a black mask and suit, the stormtroopers, the Empire/First Order, the three antagonist pyramid scheme, the Death Star, and many, many more examples that you could fill an entire video with on its own. Now, remakes aren't inherently bad, but this obviously isn't supposed to be a remake. It's supposed to be a continuation of the Star Wars storyline as well as a stepping stone for the future movies that they have already promised to make. The recycling of Episode 4's remains negatively affects both of these purposes. Not only will the storyline lose realism as you watch the same events reoccur, but it also makes you predict what's going to happen, not just in the offending film, but in future films as well. For example, I fully predict the scenes with Luke and Yoda, aka The Last Jedi, to strongly resemble the training between Rey and Luke in Episode 8. There hadn't been a Star Wars movie in several years before Episode 7, and I can understand them wanting to make the movie nostalgic, and I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is when nostalgia gets in the way of plot or character development or any other major aspect of the film. The creators seem so worried about making the same mistakes Episodes 1 through 3 did that they're hiding behind this shield of nostalgia, hoping nobody peeks over. And it clearly worked. Most people loved Episode 7, while they didn't love the prequels. I was also one in the audience that got so excited when I first saw Mark Hamill, or when I saw the Millennium Falcon first take off, or when I saw Carrie Fisher plotting to destroy the Death Star planet thing. I bought the hype, and frankly, it drew less attention to the film's flaws, and it wasn't until months later when I rewatched it and got my full analysis. The last thing I want to mention in this topic is that it seems kind of lazy to follow the same trends instead of creating an original work that takes the audience to places they haven't been. Say what you will about the prequels, but at least they did that. I think they did anyway. Now you might be thinking, but Pat, is anything actually original? Don't all good movies follow guidelines and story arcs that have been done time and time again? Yes, and most of the time you should follow those principles of filmcraft, but there's a reason certain movies don't feel like carbon copies, and that's primarily because of how they're dressed. If your movie isn't unique, and it never truly is, then make it look unique, feel unique, sound unique, smell unique, taste unique. I don't advocate eating movies. It's probably not good for you. Filmcraft is all about deceiving your audience into thinking you're in a world that you created. But how am I supposed to believe a world is real when cheesy lines that disrupt the characters' genuine reactions and behaviors are made purely because the movie wants to milk the audience for nostalgia? This is my first time doing a scripted camera video, and it's a lot harder than I thought it'd be. Sometimes I gotta pull up my sheets. Sorry about that. Movies can be nostalgic and still feel unique if you put effort into it, but I believe Episode 7 falls flat in this front, and that's one of my problems with it. So full disclosure, this is actually my second day of recording, so if the perspective looks a little bit different or the audio sounds just a little bit off from last time, then I apologize. Hopefully it's all relatively similar. Anyway, back to the video. My next problem with Episode 7 is the overuse of cop-outs. There's no concrete definition for what a cop-out means, So the best way for me to express myself is to give some examples. Here's a sequence of scenes that come right after each other that's just full, chock full of cop-outs. Also, just to make sure I get this right, I'm going to be reading directly from the script here. Rey and Finn need to run, and they happen to find the beloved spaceship that's been missing and supposedly broken. Well, they happen to get it working and fly it out of space. It's a good thing they did, too, because Han Solo happens to run into them while looking for the very same ship in the very same atmosphere. But almost immediately, they happen to be interrupted by two different villainous groups that happen to arrive at the exact same time. This sequence of scenes is probably one of my least favorite in the entire movie, not just because of the cop-outness, but also a couple other things that'll be explained later in the video, because this is a good example for some problems. There are certainly more displays of cop-outness throughout the entire movie, but there's one thing in particular that really rubs me the wrong way. Credit where credit's due, I was actually a fan of the map subplot because it wasn't copying episode 4. I thought, hey, this is cool. Luke only found out about Yoda because Ben told him, which some would say, in and of itself, is a cop-out. And while the broader picture is similar in episode 7, it still felt a little more fresh and deep. They're missing a piece of the map? Great, more complexity to keep me interested. I hope this goes the right direction. Nope, it does not. They shut it down, using the heaviest cop-out as the final nail in the coffin. Around the end of the movie, after all the fighting, R2-D2 happens to wake up and he happens to have the missing piece of the map. For starters, the Resistance is already thinking that R2-D2 might have the map, so you'd think their first priority would be to crack that sucker open and search through all the data they can, or find some way to boot it up, find every power cord that can fit in the darn thing, just to wake R2 up. It's a droid. It's not a human being. You can wake up a droid, right? Is there not a single computer engineer in the entire Resistance? One could argue that this whole arc was created just so that they couldn't get the map until the end. Just to barely tease Luke and get people really excited for episode 8. And I would reply, yes, that is absolutely true. I don't see that as a bad thing. It's nice to have a cliffhanger at the end of something really exciting, like Mark Hamill, who we haven't seen yet, and it gets us excited for the next movie. It's a good tactic. I approve of that. But there are better ways to do this. One example, and this is the biggest missed opportunity if you ask me, is to have Rey, Finn, and Han get the map piece from the planet Death Star thing. What if after she is rescued and about to leave, Rey, who has mind-reading powers mind you, figures out that the First Order has a map piece in their computer system? This adds up really well since it's already been made clear that the First Order has a piece of the map. But hey, you mix it up a bit, make it the First Order has a piece of the map the Resistance doesn't have, and the Resistance has a piece of the map that the First Order doesn't have, and only when the two come together can you actually find Luke Skywalker. All I'm saying is that Rey finding the map piece inside the computers could actually work, potentially. So instead of safely leaving when they can, the gang is forced to stay longer, which ultimately becomes the cause of Han's death. Maybe even Rey feels resentment. Maybe she feels that his death was because of her. It would just give her a little bit more character, and frankly, she could use a little bit more character. This is what you call a plot twist, and it can be quite thrilling. If they're killing off Han in the same scenario they did with Ben anyway, then at least this idea might throw the audience off track just for a bit until the inevitability. Does that not sound at least a little bit better than R2-D2 happening to have the map piece and waking up just in time for Christmas? This is the most devastating cop-out in episode 7, but it and all the others could have been cleaned up with a little bit of effort, some shoe shine, some spat. Don't know what that is. And still take the viewers to whatever insane destination you want them to be at. I understand that some companies don't have the time to put in thought to make their insane destinations work, but ultimately, if it doesn't work, you take it out. And cop-outs certainly don't work, and that's why it's one of my biggest problems. The final point of this video is actually unlabeled for a long time because I have two major problems that are tied together, albeit relatively loosely. If you'd like, you can take this portion more as myself wrapping up my thoughts instead of as a main bullet point. My problems are labeled as character development and the amazing race. So, the amazing character develop race. So, when it comes to new characters, I was fond of some and less fond of others. Though, to be honest, most of them I was not fond of. I personally don't think it's inherently wrong to bring in new characters to a series full of old beloved characters, but I do understand why some people ask, why did you bring these guys when there's already these guys? For myself, as long as the characters are fine and dandy, I'm fine and dandy. Some of the characters are not fine and dandy. In fact, I think most of them aren't. One example is Poe, who became BFFs with Finn after less than 5 minutes of screen time. Granted, 5 minutes in a movie can make all the difference if it's filled with significance. But the only thing that's happening in these 5 minutes is Poe and Finn escaping the Empire. Whoa, I made a mistake on the script. My bad. escaping the First Order, that's what it is. And it isn't exactly a heart-to-heart experience, despite the movie trying to sell it as character development. A scene where everyone's out of breath and focusing on the action around them is incredibly hard to use for meaningful dialogue. Almost every line is the two shouting, "Do this! Can we do that? How do you do this? Yeah, we did it!" Which is expected from an escape scene, but creates a very forced character bond. In this film, there are so many examples of hiding much needed relationship building behind explosions, near-death experiences, and so much running. This is where the amazing race ties in. There are so many doggone running for their life moments in this film, to the point where I'm begging, sit down for a second and process what is actually happening. Because I haven't even processed it, and you're the ones living it. Instead of processing the events, the characters usually brush it off with a one-liner, which isn't inherently bad when used sparingly, but it still only works with certain characters. In episode 4, after Han shot second, he flips a nickel to a guy and says, "Sorry about the mess," and it's the most smug thing ever. But you could argue that works with his character. He's a stone-cold killer who kills people after being shot at first. I know I'm bugging a lot of people right now. When every character has the same reaction to a near-death experience and it's, "Phew, clean up on aisle Death Star," then your characters lose any uniqueness that they have. It also gives less tension to other action scenes and makes the audience think, well, he isn't taking it seriously, so why should I? If Finn is all fine and dandy through every single situation until around the end, then why should we be scared? He's not scared. This action scene means literally nothing because Finn doesn't give a crap, so why should we? He's the one living it, why should we care? The worst part is, a lot of the action scenes are completely unnecessary and could be replaced with much needed relationship building. The first example that comes to mind is the cop-out scene I mentioned earlier, where the baddies arrive at the same time after seeing Han for the first time in 30 years. It seems like a great opportunity for the three protagonists to connect, learn about each other's backgrounds, and figure out where they mentally aid each other and where their differences might lead to conflict. Don't get me wrong, they did do this for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Of course, they were interrupted by a cast of insignificant characters and monsters for no reason other than kids don't care about these emotional scenes, they just want the action. I bumped the mic, I am so sorry. We're reaching the biggest demographic because we have nostalgia for the adults and mindless battle scenes for the kids. What about the meat and potatoes? Why can't I have something that's good for what it is and not because CGI explosions are beautiful and because characters we love that haven't been seen in 30 years are making cheesy remarks and throwbacks to previous episodes? Nostalgia is a dangerous tool that blinds many into thinking that their experience is as good as the good old days. Nostalgia in any context is bittersweet, which means there are some applications to where it's good. You just have to handle it very, very carefully. It's a great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. One defense I hear a lot for this movie and many others that are coming out today is, but it's for kids. It kind of rubs me the wrong way. Mainly because there are several really good movies out there that are for kids, such as the Disney classics my generation was fortunate enough to grow up with. Mulan is for kids, but most people of any age would agree that that's just a genuinely good movie. If you want to make a film for kids, but you can't make it good, then don't make it for kids. In an ideal world, the quality of the movie is the most important thing, and the demographic should by no means get in the way of that quality. But that's not the case with a lot of movies coming out today, including this one. Well, I know, came out 2 years ago, but within this time span, whatever. Instead, the film creators are so worried about the reception after the people's reaction to the prequels that they put more effort into flashy action scenes and making the audience go, "Ooh, that guy said this, which was also said in this episode. That makes me feel good inside, makes me think of the good old days." Then into building characters and putting deadly scenes where they're actually necessary. As a quick note, the last quarter of the film was actually my favorite part, because the intense rush is appropriate when leading to the climax. Because at that point, we're supposed to already know enough about the characters to make us care for them. It's just a shame that those scenes were littered everywhere and getting in the way of seriously needed character development. And that is my final, relatively tied together major problem with this film that I will be talking about today. So those are my major problems, but again, please don't mistake this as a negative review, because I still enjoyed the movie. There are 1 or 2 Star Wars movies that I would actually call bad, but those warrant their own video. Wink, wink. I've been trying not to make this video incredibly long, so there are more examples and problems that I could have brought up but didn't. But if you'd like, I can discuss it further with you in the comment section below. I think when the movie first came out, a lot of people were in the mindset that because the prequels are so bad, we can't even criticize this one because it's so much better than the prequels. Those aren't my thoughts, but that's probably the general mindset when this movie first came out. But at the end of the day, we gotta treat this movie fairly, just like we should treat the prequels fairly, and the original trilogy fairly. Everything fairly. This is a fair world. Nothing unfair happens ever. I really hope The Last Jedi addresses these issues and improves them dramatically. And who knows, it has a new director, so maybe things will be better. But God forbid I say anything bad about J.J. Abrams. I'd be burned at the stake. He is a perfect human being and everything he does is gold. Don't be mad at me, please. I can't afford to be mad at. If you'd like to listen to a movie-themed podcast episode with myself and guests where we briefly talk about Star Wars, then you could check out my movie-themed podcast episode with myself and guests where we briefly talk about Star Wars. I probably didn't articulate myself there as well as I did here just because, it was live and unscripted, but I do go over some of the things I actually like about the film, as well as other movies. We talked about a lot of movies there, so you should check it out, for sure. That's going to be it for the meat and potatoes. Let me know what you guys think of the movie in the comments below. I'm going to make a separate video on PatNet 2 talking about the changes I'm making to this channel and where I've been and such, and why there are tumbleweeds everywhere. So if that's your fancy, you can check it out in the end cards. Thank you so much for watching, and so long. Hey, you do some switcheroos, you can have... R2 had the missing piece and woke up just in time for Christmas. I like that line. We're reaching the biggest demographic because we have nostalgia for the adults, and... We're reaching the biggest...